one study guide for government for your quiz. First question here, talking about the concepts of Declaration of Independence. When was it written? It was written July 4th, 1776, and there you can look at the five different things talking about all men are created equal, the rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, securing your rights, and the government is governed by the consent of the governed. The Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments you need to know. You can use your cheat sheet for those. Principles of the Constitution, you need to be able to define each one of these. So popular sovereignty, separation of powers, limited government, federalism, checks and balances, and judicial review. Quick definition of democracy: supreme political authority rests with the people. Then your concepts of democracy. Again, we talked about each concept and connecting them to our lives. So worth of the individual, equality of all persons, majority rule and minority rights, necessity of compromise, and individual freedoms. So again, be able to provide an example of each concept. Talking about the Articles of Confederation, the first government that failed and some of the weaknesses. One vote for each state, it didn't matter how big they were. Congress couldn't collect taxes. Congress couldn't regulate trade and interstate commerce. There's no executive branch to enforce things. No national court system. They could not amend the Constitution unless all the states agreed. And in order to pass a law, 9 of 13 states had to agree on that law. Again, this is more like a league of friendship. The purpose of the Constitutional Convention at first was to amend the Articles of Confederation. It was held in Philadelphia, but then eventually it led to the creation of the United States Constitution. Looking at the Virginia and New Jersey plans and who supported them. So Virginia plan was supported by the big states. It was a bicameral system based on population. So the more people in your state, the more representation. Also based on the amount of money you could give to support the government. They had a House of Reps, a Senate. They could legislate, and they also added an executive and judicial branch. Versus the New Jersey plan, which was favored by the small states, only had one house in Congress, and everyone had equal representation. They had the power to tax. They could regulate trade. The executive branch for them would have more than one person, and then they would have a judicial branch. So the three compromises that finally made up the Constitution and helped it successfully pass. Representation in Congress was combined in the Connecticut Compromise. So you had the Senate and the House. Senate was based on equal representation, and the House was based on population. So they pleased both the large states and the small states. The Three-Fifths Compromise then was talking about slaves and how they counted. So to resolve this, all free men will be counted, and then 3/5 of all other persons would be counted towards the population, which would then help their representation in the House of Reps. And the last thing, the Commerce and Slave Trade Compromise. It was agreed that Congress could regulate foreign and interstate trade. The South was nervous that this would hurt their economy, but Congress would not act for their agricultural interests. Congress would not interfere with slave trade. So again, they wouldn't act on the slave trade for 20 years, and they wouldn't tax exports that were leaving the state. What are checks and balances? What is an example? So each branch has the job to check on the other branch, make sure they're doing their job. And there's a couple examples listed there for you. Here's some scenarios then, based on the Bill of Rights and other amendments. So understand these basic amendments and these rights. Looking at like the first one, custody by the police. The officer refused to tell him why, so he was arrested unlawfully. What was he violating? That was the Sixth Amendment. Looking at presidential terms would be the 22nd Amendment. Beth has been hired by the city of Springfield. She was fired for her religious beliefs. That violates the First Amendment. Newspaper printing stories, and they're trying to threaten to shut them down. It's also First Amendment freedom of press. Looking at search and seizure in a trunk, illegally searching. That's the Fourth Amendment. The last, Luke here, not guilty of armed robbery. Then they try him again for the same crime, exact same crime as double jeopardy. That's the Fifth Amendment. And the last one, Amanda's found guilty of shoplifting, and her sentence is 25 years. What does that violate? that would violate the Eighth Amendment and excessive punishments. There's a quick overview of your Unit 1 study aid.